The auctioneer read the tax notice off a one-room shack Nora Vance's great-uncle had died in, and her own cousin Wade said loud enough for the courthouse steps to hear, "Worthless, not worth financing a dime," while Nora signed for it anyway with $900 and a manila envelope that misspelled her name. $900 for a shack, $1,180 more in back taxes hanging over it like a second mortgage on nothing. A dog that wouldn't quit digging at the same floorboard night after night, like he already knew something the bank didn't. A postcard 2 winters old, folded soft as cloth, with one line on it nobody in the family had bothered to read twice. And a cousin in a bank blazer who was about to find out exactly what 42 acres of unrecorded creek frontage does to a man's marina financing when the wrong woman won't let go of a 200-square-foot shack. Wade Renner smiled when he said worthless. He always smiled when he lied, which was most of the time he opened his mouth in a suit, but that's getting ahead of things. Let's go back to a Sunday in October, 6 years running, before any of this had a price tag on it at all. Nora Vance drove the same 11 miles every Sunday morning, rain or frost, or the one time in 2022 the low-water bridge went under and she'd had to take the long way around through Cades Hollow, adding 40 minutes to a trip that was never about time anyway. She drove a 2009 Silverado with a jump box rattling in the bed and a tow hitch that had paid her rent every month since she was 22. She could back that truck up to a ditched Buick in the dark, in the rain, first try, no spotter. Men twice her age at Denny's wrecker service still asked her to check their angles for them. She never said no. She never said much of anything, actually, unless it needed saying. The shack sat on a bend of Sable Creek where Route 9 crossed the low-water bridge, close enough to hear the water and close enough to smell it too, mud and creek moss and something like a cellar even above ground. One room, a wood stove, a bait cooler that hadn't held bait in years. And behind the register counter, a hound dog named Roscoe, who used to belong to a man named Hollis Renner, and who now belonged more or less to nobody. Hollis was Nora's great-uncle, her grandmother's brother, a man who'd run trot lines on this creek since Eisenhower, who'd built half the cabinetry in 3 counties with his own hands, and who spent his last 4 years forgetting most people's names, including eventually Nora's. She kept coming anyway. She filled Roscoe's water bowl. She walked down to the creek gauge nailed to the old cypress post and read the water level off the same rusted markings Hollis had taught her to read when she was 9 years old, standing in waders 3 sizes too big. Then she wrote the number in his logbook, in his own column, in her own handwriting, because somebody had to keep doing it and there wasn't anybody else who cared to. "You don't have to keep coming out here," her mother told her once, back when her mother still called. "He doesn't even know you anymore, baby." "I know him," Nora said. That was the whole answer. She didn't offer more, and nobody asked twice. 2 winters before he died, Hollis mailed her a postcard. Not a letter. A postcard, the kind you'd buy at a gas station. A faded photo of the Sable Creek low-water bridge on the front, water running high and brown. On the back, in handwriting that was already starting to shake, he'd written one line. "Don't let them tell you what a thing's worth till you've looked underneath it." No signature. He didn't need one. Nora kept it in her wallet behind her driver's license, and she never once asked herself what it meant, because a man losing his mind writes plenty of things that don't mean anything, and you learn not to go digging for meaning in a dying man's scraps. That was what she told herself anyway. Hollis passed in February, quiet in his sleep, the kind of ending the family agreed was a mercy and then didn't discuss again. Nora didn't cry in front of anybody. She went to the funeral, stood in the back, and drove home to Sable Creek that same night to feed a dog that wasn't officially hers yet. The estate went to probate in March. That was when Wade Renner showed up in a blazer that cost more than Nora's truck payment, carrying a folder instead of a shovel, which in Sable Creek was its own kind of insult. Wade was Hollis's son, estranged mostly for reasons nobody said out loud but everybody understood, the kind of estrangement built out of years of a father who wouldn't loan money and a son who wouldn't visit without asking for it. Wade worked loans at Sable Creek Trust, 2 doors down from the feed store, and he had a way of talking about land the way other men talked about livestock, weighing it, pricing it, moving it along. The probate hearing wasn't much. A judge, a clerk, a folder of documents nobody outside a law office would ever read twice. The house and the 60 acres around it went to Wade, clean, undisputed, because Wade was blood, and Wade had a lawyer, and Wade had gotten there first. The savings account went to Wade too. $41,000 gone into an account with Wade's name on it inside of 6 weeks. What was left was the shack down by the low-water bridge, sitting on its own separate half-acre parcel, tangled up in back taxes, going back to when Hollis first stopped being able to keep track of his own mail. $1,180 owed to the county, the clerk read out, flat, bored, like she was reading a weather report. Property to be sold at public auction to satisfy the lien. Wade didn't even look at the shack listing twice. He'd already had it appraised, quietly, the month before, using his own bank's numbers. $900, he said to the room, to nobody in particular, the way a man says something he wants overheard. Worthless. Not worth financing a dime. He said it standing 2 feet from Nora. He said it smiling. Wade had learned that trick from somewhere, calling something worthless right in front of the person who loved it, like the insult was a kindness, like he was saving her the trouble of hoping. Nora didn't argue with him. She'd learned a long time ago that arguing with Wade was like arguing with a closed door. You just bruised your knuckles and he stayed shut. She waited until the auctioneer, a heavy-set man named Dale Whitfield, who ran these county sales twice a year and knew better than to make eye contact with grieving families, called the property up for bid. Nobody else in the courthouse wanted a shack on a flood bend with a bait cooler and no plumbing to speak of. $900 going once, Whitfield said. $900, Nora said. She had $1,140 total in her checking account that morning. She'd checked it twice at a stoplight on the drive over, which was a foolish thing to do at a stoplight, but she'd done it anyway. 900 of it went across the folding table in a check she'd already made out the night before, hoping. And the clerk handed her back a manila envelope with the deed inside. The envelope had her name typed on the front. Nora Vane, not Vance. Vane. She almost said something. She looked at it a second too long, felt the little sting of it, a whole life reduced to a clerical error nobody would ever bother fixing. And then she folded the envelope once and put it under her arm and walked out past Wade without another word. "You know that place floods every spring," Wade called after her, still smiling, still performing for whoever was listening. "Bank wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't touch it. I'm just saying, Nora, you paid $900 for a problem." "Then it's my problem," Nora said, not turning around. "Not yours anymore." That much at least felt like winning, even if she couldn't have said exactly what she'd won. She drove straight to the shack that same afternoon before she'd even eaten lunch, envelope still on the passenger seat with her name spelled wrong on it. Roscoe met her at the door the way he always did, tail low, hips stiff, an old dog who'd outlived the man who raised him and hadn't quite worked out what came next. She filled his water bowl. She walked down to the creek gauge out of habit more than anything and wrote the level in the logbook, same as always, because a routine 6 years deep doesn't just stop the day a man's name changes hands from Renner to Vane on a piece of county paper. That was the day she first noticed Roscoe wasn't just pacing near the bait cooler, he was working at it. Nose down, one paw scraping the same floorboard over and over in the same corner where the cooler's rubber foot didn't quite sit flush anymore. "Move, boy," Nora said, nudging him aside with her knee. The board gave a little under her boot. Not rotten, loose, like something built to come up on purpose. She knelt down in the dust and the cold and the smell of old creek water, and she worked her fingers into the seam, and the plank lifted clean in her hand like it had been waiting on her. Underneath it wasn't dirt. It was a trapdoor. Iron ring, flush handle, and stamped into the metal in letters gone dark with rust. 4 characters and a year. H.R. 1959. Locked. No visible dial, no keyhole she could find with her fingers in the fading light, just a padlock body fused solid with 50 years of rust and river damp. Nora sat back on her heels, Roscoe's nose pressed against the cold iron beside her, and for the first time since the courthouse steps that morning, she wasn't thinking about $900 or $1,180 or the way her cousin said her name like it embarrassed him to use it. She was thinking about a postcard in her wallet, and a line she'd never once let herself take seriously. Don't let them tell you what a thing's worth till you've looked underneath it. Nora sat there a long moment with her fingers still resting on the cold iron ring. Roscoe whined once, low in his throat, then laid down right on top of the trapdoor like he meant to guard it. "You knew," she said to him. "This whole time. You knew." He thumped his tail twice against the plank and didn't move. She tried the lock first with her hands, which was foolish, and she knew it was foolish even while she was doing it. 50 years of rust doesn't care how bad you want something open. She went out to the truck and got a hammer and a flathead screwdriver from behind the seat, and she worked at the padlock body for 20 minutes in the cold, breath fogging, knees aching on the plank floor. The lock didn't budge, but something else did, a hairline seam she hadn't noticed before, running along the underside of the iron ring where it met the wood. Like the whole mechanism had been fitted, not bolted, fitted the way a good carpenter fits a drawer, tight enough you'd never see the gap unless you were looking for it. That stopped her cold. Hollis didn't buy things. Hollis built things. He'd built the cabinets in half the kitchens on this creek, and every one of them had that same fitted, patient look to the joints. No nail heads showing, no gaps you could slide a dime into. She sat back on her heels. "This isn't a bought lock," she said out loud, "to nobody but the dog. He made this." Roscoe just watched her with his cloudy old eyes like he'd been waiting 6 years for her to catch up. She put the plank back down that evening, gently, the way you'd close a door on a room you weren't ready to walk into yet. She locked the shack, which felt almost funny given what was sitting under the floor, unlocked to her curiosity and locked to everything else. She drove home in the dark with the truck heater rattling and her mind running in a circle it couldn't get out of. $900, $1,180 owed, a vault a dead man built with his own hands. 2 days later, she went into town for the things a shack needs when somebody's decided to actually live around it again. Stove bolts, a new hasp for the front door, a sack of dog food since Roscoe wasn't going anywhere, and neither apparently was she. $31 at the feed store. She counted it out in ones and fives at the counter, and the girl ringing her up didn't blink, because everybody in Sable Creek had counted out money like that at some point. She stopped at the county annex on the way back, the little cinder block building 2 doors down from Sable Creek Trust, to ask about the back taxes before they turned into a bigger problem than they already were. The clerk behind the counter was a woman named Patsy Odom, who'd known Nora's mother in high school and treated every piece of paperwork like a personal favor she was doing you. $1,180, Patsy said, tapping the screen. "Due in full within 30 days of the sale recording, or the county reopens it for a second auction. That's the rule now, hun. Used to be 60 days. Commissioners changed it last year." 30 days, Nora repeated. 30 days from Tuesday, Patsy said. "So?" She counted on her fingers, mouthing the month. "You've got till the 4th of November. Nora did the math without needing her fingers. She had $900 less in her account than she'd had a week ago, and she needed $1,180 more on top of what she already didn't have inside a month, or somebody else got a second bite at Hollis's shack. "Anybody asking about that parcel?" Nora said. "Since the sale?" Patsy's mouth did something careful. "I'm not supposed to say who inquires." Patsy. "I didn't say a name," Patsy said, looking hard at her keyboard. "I'm just saying, somebody from a title company out of Chattanooga called twice this week wanting a plat map of that creek frontage. Twice in 1 week for a half acre with a bait shack on it. That struck me as a lot of interest for worthless." Nora felt something settle into place in her chest. Not quite fear and not quite anger. Something more like the feeling of watching a truck start to slide on ice before it's fully sliding. "Thank you, Patsy." "Don't thank me," Patsy said. "I didn't tell you anything." Nora walked out into the gray afternoon with $31 less in her pocket and a 30-day clock now ticking somewhere behind her ribs. She almost didn't see the man down by the creek bank on her way back to the truck, if she hadn't glanced toward the water out of habit, the same habit that made her check the gauge every Sunday for 6 years. He was standing on the far bank in an orange vest, a tripod set up in the mud, sighting something through a little scope down the length of the water toward the low-water bridge. She didn't know him. She knew most every face that worked this stretch of Route 9, and this wasn't one of them. "Help you find something?" she called across the water, not unfriendly, just direct, the way she said most things. He looked up, gave her a professional kind of smile, the kind that had been trained onto a face rather than grown there. Just running some elevation lines, he said. County project. What county project runs elevation lines on private creek frontage? Above my pay grade, ma'am, he said, and went back to his scope like the conversation was over. She stood there a second longer than she needed to, memorizing his vest, his truck parked up on the shoulder with a magnetic sign she couldn't read from that distance, and then she got in her own truck and drove home, turning the whole thing over. That night, back at the shack, feeding Roscoe his $31 of dog food, she found $5 bills tucked under the water bowl, rolled tight, rubber-banded damp at one corner from where the bowl had sweat onto them, $20 even, no note, no name. She stood in the doorway holding it, looking around like whoever left it might still be standing there, watching her figure it out. Nobody was. She thought of 3 or 4 people it might have been, and settled on none of them for certain, because that was the way kindness worked out here, quiet and unsigned, the same way Hollis had done half his good for people for 40 years, without ever once mentioning it after. She put the 20 in the coffee can by the register, next to the $7 and change already sitting there from bait sales nobody was really coming to buy bait for anymore, and she went back to staring at the floor where the plank sat, innocent looking, over a vault she couldn't open. She needed somebody who understood locks, not hardware store locks. The kind a man spends 30 years learning to build and to break, the kind that don't show up in any catalog because they were never meant to be bought, only made. Her grandmother used to talk about a man Hollis worked cabinets with, years back, before Nora was even born, mostly. A name that came up at Thanksgiving sometimes, in the way names come up when the people attached to them have drifted out of daily life, but never fully out of memory. Gus Farley. She remembered the shape of the name more than the man. Retired now, her grandmother had said once, lived up past the second bridge, used to fix safes for half the businesses in 3 counties before nobody needed a man like that anymore, before everything went digital and forgettable. If anybody could look at a lock-stamped HR. 1959 and tell her what she was looking at. It was a man who'd spent 30 years standing next to the hands that built it. She found his number the old way, in the yellowed pages of Hollis's own address book, still sitting on the shelf behind the register where he'd left it. Gus's name, written in Hollis's careful cabinet maker's hand, no fax number, just a phone number with a prefix that hadn't been in use in Sable Creek for a decade. She dialed it anyway, sitting on the shack's one stool with Roscoe's head heavy on her boot, the postcard from her wallet lying flat on the counter in front of her, like she needed to look at it while she waited for anybody to pick up. It rang 4 times. She was already rehearsing what she'd say to a machine. Then a voice, older than she expected, rough at the edges like gravel that had been rained on. Farley. Mr. Farley, she said. My name's Nora Vance. Hollis Renner was my great-uncle. There was a pause on the line long enough that she wondered if the call had dropped. Hollis's girl, the voice said finally, and it wasn't a question, the one that kept coming out on Sundays. Nora's throat tightened up on her before she could stop it. You knew about that? Hollis mentioned it, Gus said. More than once. Man didn't say much toward the end, but he said that. Another pause. What can I do for you, Nora Vance? I found something, she said. Under the floor of his shack. A lock. It's got his initials stamped in it and a date, 1959, and I can't get it open, and I think he built it himself. The line went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet this time. Not surprised. Something closer to recognition settling into place. Slow, like a man nodding to himself on the other end of a phone, he thought he'd never need to answer for this. 1959, Gus said. Well, I'll be. You know something about it? I know Hollis Renner didn't do much of anything twice the same way, Gus said. And I know if he built a lock with his own hands and put a date on it, that lock wasn't meant to keep out strangers. What was it meant for? It was meant for somebody who already had the key, Gus said, and didn't know it yet. Gus Farley came out to the shack 2 days later, driving an old Ford with a toolbox bolted into the bed. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up on a Wednesday afternoon, parked crooked on the gravel, and stood looking at the place for a long minute before he ever said a word. Hollis painted that trim himself, he said. Nobody else cuts a line that straight. You came all this way to look at paint? I came all this way, Gus said, to look at a lock. Nora led him inside. Roscoe lifted his head off the trapdoor plank, sniffed the air, and thumped his tail twice, like he remembered the man's smell from somewhere long back. Well, Gus said, look who's still on guard duty. He got down on his knees slower than Nora had, joints cracking, and ran his fingers along the iron ring the same way she had that first evening. He didn't try the lock. He just felt the seam where metal met wood, the way she had, and he went quiet in a way that made the whole room feel smaller. Hairline fit, he said finally. No caulk, no filler. He shaved this wood down himself till the door sat flush. Can you open it? Not with a hammer, Gus said. You'd have bent that lock long before you bent Hollis Renner. He worked at it a different way, with a thin pick and a loop of wire he pulled out of a tin in his toolbox, patient, murmuring to himself, until something inside the padlock gave a small metallic sigh and the shackle popped loose in his hand. There, he said, like he'd just untied a shoe. Nora lifted the plank all the way back on its hinge, the iron ring cold against her palm again, and this time the trapdoor came with it, swinging up on hinges that hadn't seen daylight in longer than she'd been alive. Underneath, concrete steps went down into the dark, 6 of them, maybe 7, disappearing past the reach of the one flashlight she kept behind the register. Gus whistled low. That's not a root cellar for potatoes. You knew he had this? I knew Hollis Renner spent about 4 years back in the late 50s, always running short on cabinet lumber, Gus said. Man'd order twice what a job needed. I used to tease him about it. He'd just say a good cabinet maker plans for more than one project. They went down together, Nora first with the flashlight, Gus behind her with one hand on the wall, the air turning cool and mineral the lower they got, smelling like wet stone and old rust. At the bottom, the steps opened into a room no bigger than a closet, concrete on all 4 sides, and set into the far wall was a door. Not a door like the one upstairs. Steel, riveted at the edges, painted a green gone dull with age. No handle Nora could see, no keyhole. Just a small brass panel at chest height with a single dial recessed into it, no numbers printed anywhere. And beneath the dial, stamped into the steel itself, 4 words. Ask the water, not the lock. Gus put his flashlight right up on it and read it twice. Well, I'll be double, he said. He built a combination safe door out of a bank vault frame and he didn't even leave you numbers. He left me something better, Nora said, and her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. He left me 6 years of Sundays. She went back upstairs 2 steps at a time, Roscoe barking once at her heels like he thought this was a game, and came back down with the logbook, the same water-stained ledger she'd copied creek readings into every week since she was 22. She flipped to the last page Hollis had written in himself, before his hand got too shaky to be trusted with numbers, and held the flashlight on it so Gus could see. Gauge reading, October 12th, 4.7 feet. Gauge reading, October 19th, 5.2 feet. Gauge reading, October 26th, 3.9 feet. He wasn't writing down the creek, Nora said slowly. Or he was, but he was also writing down something else. Look how careful this is. He never missed a single Sunday for 30 years, Gus. A man doesn't keep a logbook that clean just for a creek nobody's grading him on. Gus turned the dial once, testing it, feeling it click soft under his thumb like a safe that had been oiled more recently than 50 years ago. Try it, he said. 475239. Left, right, left. That's how these old bank dials run. Nora knelt in front of the panel, her hands not quite steady, and turned the dial to 4 7/10, the way you'd read a gauge, past 52, back to 39. Nothing happened. No click, no give. Wrong 3, Gus said. Or wrong order. There's 30 years of Sundays in this book, Nora said, staring at the ledger like it might rearrange itself for her. I can't just guess which 3 he meant. Gus sat back against the concrete wall, catching his breath the way a man his age has to after climbing down into anything. Man built a whole vault door on a story he never told anybody, he said. He wanted somebody to have to work for it. That's not cruelty. That's Hollis all over. He didn't believe in giving a thing away easy. He believed in making sure whoever got it earned the knowing of it first. They came back up into daylight a while later, no closer to the combination. The trapdoor propped open and Roscoe curled protectively at its lip like a dog standing sentry over his own grave. Nora sat on the shack's one stool with the postcard from her wallet in one hand and the logbook in the other, running her thumb along Hollis's line about looking underneath things, wondering if that was the whole clue or only half of it. That was when a truck pulled up outside that wasn't hers or Gus's. A newer one, dark green, with a magnetic door sign she didn't need to squint at this time because it was close enough to read. Kessler Group, Land Marine Development. A man in a collared shirt got out, younger than Wade, carrying a folder under one arm like he was used to carrying folders into rooms where people didn't want him. "Afternoon," he said, friendly, professional, the same trained smile the surveyor down at the creek had worn. "I'm looking for the Renner parcel. Somebody said the shack sale went through last week." "You're standing on it," Nora said. "Great, great." He glanced past her at the open shack door like he was already mentally measuring it for demolition. "I represent a group finalizing financing on the marina project just downstream. We've got the Renner Estates 42 acres pledged as collateral already, and we're trying to firm up boundary lines before the closing. You're the..." He checked his folder. "Nora Vance? That's me. Vance, not Vane, whatever the county's got typed." "Right. Well, this half-acre's not part of the pledged parcel, obviously, since it's sold separate at auction, but the creek frontage matters for our easement survey. We'd love to buy you out clean, save everybody the paperwork. I can offer $2,500 today, cash close." Nora felt Gus go very still beside her. $2,500, she repeated, for a worthless shack. "Well, it's not worthless to us," the man said, smiling wider like he'd caught himself in something and thought charm would cover it. "Location's everything in this business." "Funny," Nora said. "My cousin told a whole courthouse it wasn't worth financing a dime." The man's smile faltered half a degree. "I wouldn't know anything about that. I just handle acquisitions. Who's financing the marina?" Gus asked, mild as anything, like he was asking about the weather. "Sable Creek Trust is the lead lender," the man said. "Wade Renner's handling the estate side personally. Given the family connection, made sense to keep it in-house." Nora looked at Gus. Gus looked back at her, and something passed between them that didn't need saying out loud, not with the man from Kessler Group still standing there in his collared shirt holding his folder like a shield. "Tell your Mr. Renner," Nora said, "that I'm not selling anything. Not today, not this month. You've got till the 4th of November on those back taxes, is my understanding," the man said, and for a second the friendliness dropped clean off his face like a mask coming loose. "After that, this parcel goes back to auction, and we'll just buy it there instead. Might as well save yourself the trouble." "Might as well," Nora said. "Get off my land." He left without much more than that, backing his dark green truck around in the gravel and pulling out toward the low-water bridge, and Nora stood, watching the dust settle behind him with her arms crossed tight against a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "He's pledging land he doesn't own free and clear," Gus said quietly. "Not till whatever's in that vault says otherwise." "You think that's what's down there?" "A deed?" "I think," Gus said. "Your uncle spent 30 years building cabinets and one very good safe, and men don't do that for coffee cans of silver alone. Silver's nice. Silver doesn't scare off a bank." Nora looked down at the logbook again, 30 years of careful numbers in a dead man's hand, and for the first time she understood she wasn't looking for a treasure. She was looking for a boundary line. 4th of November, she said. "That's 26 days. Then we'd best get you reading that book right," Gus said, "and get me back down in that cellar with a clearer head than I brought today." Gus stayed the night in the truck bed under a tarp, said he'd slept in worse, and by morning they were back at the logbook with 2 cups of coffee going cold on the counter. 475239 didn't work, Gus said, "so it's not your last readings." "Maybe it's not readings at all," Nora said. "Maybe it's floods." Gus looked up. "Say that again." "He built this thing in 59, she said. "A man doesn't pick a random year to bury a safe. He picks a year that means something." "What flood was 59? Gus sat back, chewing on it. 59 wasn't the bad one. 57 was bad. 63 was worse. 75 about took the whole bridge out. He tapped the table. Every one of those got marked, right on the pillar down at the low water bridge. County used to paint the crest line every time the creek came up big. Never scrubbed it off. Some things you just leave. You think he used the flood marks. I think your uncle watched this creek harder than any man alive, Gus said, and I think if he wanted a number nobody could talk him out of, he'd pick the ones painted in county paint, where everybody could see them and nobody would ever think to look. They drove down to the bridge together, Nora's truck rattling over the low concrete span, Roscoe's head out the window the whole way like he already knew where they were headed. The pillar stood on the downstream side, mossy at the base, 3 faded lines climbing up its face with dates stenciled next to each one, half worn to ghosts. Gus waded out in his boots to get close enough to read them. There, he said. 57 right at 4 foot on this marker, 63 closer to 9, 75, 12 and change near the top there where the paint's gone rust-colored. 4, 9, 12, Nora said, writing it in the margin of the logbook with a stub of pencil. That's not far off my own numbers, just bigger. Man built a whole language out of water, Gus said, and taught you half of it without you knowing you were learning. They didn't go straight to the vault. Nora had a can of penetrating oil to buy for Gus's picks, and gas the truck needed besides, so they swung into town first, down Route 9 past the bank with its brick front and its flag that never seemed to stop snapping in the wind, toward the feed store 2 doors down. The bell over the door rang the same way it always had, and right there on the counter, stacked in a little acrylic holder next to the register, sat a stack of glossy flyers that hadn't been there a month ago. Sable Creek Marina Landing. Founders shares available. $5,000 per unit. Limited to 50. Nora picked one up. There was a rendering on the front, docks and a clubhouse and a strip of shoreline that looked suspiciously like the bend behind Hollis's shack, except drawn clean, landscaped, with little cartoon boats tied up where cattails actually grew. 30 units sold already, the clerk said cheerfully, seeing her look at it. My brother-in-law bought 2, says it's the best thing to happen to this county in years. 30 times 5,000, Nora said quietly, is $150,000. Something like that, the clerk said, not hearing the edge in it. Wade Renner's handling all the paperwork himself. Family's from right here, you know. Whole thing feels like it's staying local. Nora set the flyer down like it had gone hot in her hand. Gus was already reading over her shoulder, jaw tight. He's selling shares, Gus said once they were back outside, against land he doesn't have clear title to. Land that might not even be his daddy's to pledge, once that deed surfaces. $150,000 of other people's money, Nora said, sitting on top of a lie. That's not a lie that stays quiet forever, Gus said. Money like that, somebody always starts asking questions eventually. They drove back out toward the shack with the flyer folded on the dash between them, and the whole way Nora kept doing the math in her head, the $2,500 the Kessler man had offered her against the $150,000 already raised, against the $1,180 in back taxes standing between her and losing the one piece of ground that could blow the entire thing open. They weren't there 5 minutes, Gus still unloading his toolbox, before a car she recognized pulled up too fast on the gravel and stopped crooked. Wade Renner got out of it in a good shirt with the sleeves rolled. No folder this time, no smile either. Nora. His voice had none of the courthouse charm left in it. We need to talk. About what? Nora said. The shack that wasn't worth financing a dime? About you sending some retired locksmith poking around my father's property? Wade said, glancing at Gus like he was something tracked in on a boot. I heard you had a man down in that cellar. It's my property, Nora said. Deed's got my name on it, spelled wrong or not. That half-acre, sure, Wade said. The other 42 belongs to the estate. My estate. And I don't need you and some old man digging around under it, stirring up trouble 2 weeks before closing. Funny, Nora said, since I heard you already sold 30 pieces of it. $5,000 apiece. $150,000, Wade, for land the bank itself said wasn't worth financing. Something moved across his face, quick, before he could smooth it back down. That's a different valuation. Marina Project's got nothing to do with the shack. It's got the creek frontage to do with it, Gus said mildly, setting his toolbox down slow, like he had all day. And creek frontage runs through that half-acre your cousin owns free and clear. Can't build a marina around a piece you don't hold, son. Wade's eyes flicked to Gus, then back to Nora, and for just a second, the loan officer voice slipped and something younger showed underneath it, something that sounded almost like fear dressed up as anger. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, Nora said, but I know Hollis kept every one of his numbers straighter than any bank in this county ever has. And I know come the 4th of November, when that tax sale goes through one way or the other, everybody standing on that courthouse lawn is going to want to see whatever's under this floor. There's nothing under that floor but dirt and dry rot, Wade said, but it came out too fast, too loud for a man who believed it. Then you won't mind us looking, Nora said. Wade stood a moment longer, jaw working, looking at the shack like it had personally insulted him, and then he turned without another word and got back in his car. He didn't peel out this time. He drove off slow, careful, the way a man drives when he's already doing math he doesn't like the answer to. Nora watched the dust settle and turned to Gus. He's scared. Man selling shares on land he can't prove he owns, Gus said, ought to be. He picked his toolbox back up. Let's go see what your uncle left you, before somebody else decides to come looking first. Gus went down first this time, boots careful on the wet concrete, and Nora followed with the logbook held flat against her chest like it might slide away from her. 4, she said. Left. Gus turned the dial slow, feeling for the click. 4, 9, right, 9, 12, left. The dial stopped hard, like it had hit a wall. No give, no sound. Nothing, Gus said. Nora stared at the numbers she'd written in pencil. 4, 9, 12, straight off the bridge pillar. It felt right. It felt like Hollis. But the door hadn't moved an inch. Maybe he didn't read them the way the county painted them, Gus said. Maybe he read them the way he read everything else. Oldest first. Try it backward, Nora said. Gus reset the dial. 12, left, 9, right. 4, left, still nothing. Roscoe whined at the top of the stairs, pacing, not liking the closed-in air of the cellar. Nora looked at the stamp on the door again. Ask the water, not the lock. Water didn't run in whole numbers. It ran in fractions, feet and inches. Her own gauge readings never came out even either. Try 12.5, she said suddenly. Not 12. 75 wasn't just 12 feet, Gus. It was 12 too. I remember hearing my granddad say it. 12 foot 2 inches. Worst flood this creek ever saw. You sure? No, Nora said. But neither was 4. Gus turned the dial to 4 point something and stopped. 4 was never a clean number either, was it? 4-3, Nora said, working it in her head. 57 crested at 4-3. 63 was 9-1. 75, 12-2. Gus dialed it slow, each stop deliberate. 4 3/10 left, 9 1/10 right, 12 2/10 left. The dial caught different this time, a small tight click, like a tumbler falling into a groove that had been waiting 50 years for it. Nobody moved. Try the handle, Nora said. There wasn't a handle. There was a bolt lever set flush in the steel, and Gus put both hands on it and pulled, and it gave with a groan that sounded like the whole cellar exhaling. The door swung out a foot, heavy, stiff on its hinge, cold air pouring past them smelling like tin and dust, and something faintly sweet, like old paper. Nora's flashlight found the shelf first. Coffee cans, 6 of them, lined up neat as soldiers, labels gone soft and brown with age. Gus reached in and lifted one, and it was heavier than it looked, heavier than coffee has any business being. And when he set it down too fast, the lid popped and a stream of silver dollars spilled across the concrete floor, ringing off each other in the dark like small bells. Nora knelt and picked one up. Cold, heavier than a quarter, worn smooth on one face. 1921. She read off the rim, angling it to the light. That's not the last one either, Gus said, crouched now, turning coins over in his palm. Look here. 1904, 1890-something. Can't read it clean. He looked up at her. Son, these aren't spending money. These are collector coins. Some of these could run $30, $40 a piece to the right buyer. Maybe more. There's got to be 200 coins in just this one can, Nora said, her voice gone thin. 6 cans, Gus said. Neither of them said the number out loud. It sat between them anyway, too big for the room. Nora reached past the spilled can, into the dark of the vault, feeling along the back shelf, and her fingers found something rolled tight, tied with a string gone brittle as old grass. She pulled at it gently, and it wouldn't come, wedged behind a second can that hadn't tipped. "There's something back here," she said. "Paper. Rolled. Don't force it," Gus said sharp, catching her wrist. "Old paper tears like wet leaves. You pull that wrong, you'll lose whatever's written on it." Nora froze, her hand an inch from it. "It's the deed," she said. "It has to be." "Probably is," Gus said. "And probably it's the only copy in the world." They both sat back on their heels, looking at that one rolled paper wedged in the dark like it knew exactly how much it was worth and meant to make them wait. "We ought to close this back up," Gus said after a minute. Nora turned to him like he'd lost his mind. "Close it? Gus? We're sitting on. I know what we're sitting on." His voice was steady, the way it got when he was building toward something. "But you show up at that courthouse in 3 weeks with a rolled-up paper and a story about a secret vault, and Wade Renner's lawyer's gonna say you forged it in your kitchen last Tuesday. You need this door open in front of somebody who isn't kin to either of you, somebody whose word means something on paper." Nora sat with that, the silver still cold in her palm. "The county rep," she said slowly, "the one who does the foreclosure walkthrough. That's a state employee standing right there watching you turn that dial," Gus said. "That's a witness nobody can buy off in an afternoon. That's 3 weeks from now." "3 weeks the money's not going anywhere," Gus said. "It's waited 50 years, Nora. It can wait 20 more days." She looked at the deed one more time, close enough to touch, and made herself pull her hand back. It felt like leaving somebody behind. They scooped every coin back into the can, sealed the lids, swung the heavy door shut, and Gus spun the dial hard 3 full turns so it wouldn't sit anywhere close to the combination. Up in the shack, Nora wrote nothing down. She didn't trust paper anymore, not even her own. The trouble came 4 days later, and it came dressed as a courtesy. A county car pulled up this time, white with a seal on the door, and the man who got out was younger than Wade, carrying a clipboard instead of a folder. Nora met him on the porch with Roscoe planted at her feet, growling low. "Ms. Vance, I'm with the county assessor's office. We've had a complaint filed about unsafe excavation on this parcel. Unpermitted digging, structural concerns." He glanced past her toward the shack door. "I'm going to need to post this property pending inspection." "Unsafe excavation," Nora repeated. "There's a hole under my floor, not a mine shaft. The complaint states there's been unauthorized cellar work that could compromise the foundation ahead of the scheduled tax sale walkthrough," he said, reading it flat off the clipboard like it embarrassed him a little. "Filed by a Wade Renner, as an interested party to the estate." Nora felt the cold come up her spine slow. "He's trying to lock me out before the walkthrough even happens." "I just served the notice, ma'am. Posting doesn't seal the property. It means an inspector's got to clear the cellar safe before the sale date, or the whole parcel gets pulled from that auction and rescheduled for spring." "Spring," Nora said. "That's 5 more months for him to figure out a way around this." "I don't set the schedule," the man said, already walking the notice up to the doorframe with a staple gun in his other hand. Gus came around from the truck bed where he'd been sorting his tools, watched the man staple a bright yellow sheet to the doorframe, and waited till the county car had turned back onto Route 9 before he said anything at all. "He's scared of what's down there," Gus said. "Man doesn't file a complaint like that over nothing. He's trying to buy himself time or trying to keep anybody official from setting foot in that cellar before he's ready. Or he already knows what's down there," Nora said, "and he's trying to make sure nobody with a badge sees it before he does." Gus read the yellow notice again, slower. "Inspection window's 10 days. After that, either they clear it or the sale gets bumped." He looked at her. 10 days is less than we had. "Then we get an inspector out here ourselves," Nora said, "before Wade gets a chance to grease one." Gus almost smiled at that, tired as he looked. "Now that," he said, "sounds like something your uncle would have done." Gus made the call from Nora's kitchen phone. The cord stretched clear across the room so he could pace while he talked. He didn't call the county office back. He called a man named Ansel Doyle out of Kingsport, who used to inspect grain elevators for the state and still held his engineer's license current just in case. "Ansel," Gus said, "it's Gus Farley. I need a favor and I need it fast." Whatever Ansel said on the other end made Gus almost smile. "No, nobody's dying," Gus said. "Not yet, anyway. I need eyes on a root cellar before somebody else's eyes get there first." Ansel Doyle drove down 2 days later in a truck older than Nora's, with a hard hat on the seat and a clipboard thick with carbon copy forms. He was a small man, wiry, with reading glasses pushed up in gray hair, and he shook Nora's hand like he already respected her before he knew a thing about her. "Gus tells me there's a vault down there," he said. "Built proper or built scared?" "Built proper," Gus said. "I'd stake my name on it." "Then let's go look." Ansel went down the concrete steps slow, testing each one with his boot before he trusted it with his weight. He ran a hand along the cellar wall, thumped it twice, listened to the sound it gave back. "Dry," he said. "No seep, no crumble." Whoever poured this knew what he was doing. He crouched by the vault door, studied the hinges, the seams, the flush-set bolt lever. "That's not a farmer's cellar door," he said. "That's a man who used to fix real vaults for a living and built himself one when nobody was looking." "That's my great-uncle," Nora said. Ansel didn't ask what was behind it. He wrote on his clipboard instead, steady, unhurried. "Structurally sound," he read back to her, "no hazard to occupants or inspectors. Cellar and attached vault chamber cleared for entry." He signed it, dated it, tore off the yellow copy and handed it to her. "That's $175, whenever's convenient." "I've got it now," Nora said, and went and got the cash from the coffee tin on the counter, counting it into his palm right there in the kitchen. "Keep the receipt," Ansel said. "You post that next to Wade Renner's complaint, and his little unsafe excavation story falls right over." Gus walked him back out to his truck, the two of them talking low the way old men do when they've known each other longer than they've known most anybody else. Nora watched from the porch, the yellow inspection form still warm from her hand. She was still holding it when the second car came up the drive. It wasn't Wade's this time. It was a black sedan, clean enough to have never seen gravel before, and the man who stepped out of it wore a suit that cost more than her truck. She recognized him before he said a word. He'd called the shack Sable Creek Trust's back office once, offered her $2,500 for a shack the bank itself had called worthless. "Ms. Vance," he said. "Roy Kessler. We spoke on the phone a while back." "I remember," Nora said. "I also remember you work for the bank." "I do some work for the bank," Kessler said. "I also represent private capital interested in this stretch of creek." He smiled like that was supposed to sound better. "I'd like to make you a serious offer today. $18,000 cash, closing inside 2 weeks. No inspections, no back taxes to worry about. You walk away clean." Nora looked at him a long moment. "18,000, she said. "Funny how fast the number keeps climbing on a piece of land that wasn't worth financing a dime." "Circumstances change," Kessler said. "They sure do," Nora said. "Last I heard, 30 founders' shares already sold at $5,000 apiece against this creek frontage. That's $150,000, Mr. Kessler. 18,000's a strange number to offer somebody sitting on top of that." Something behind his eyes went careful. "I don't know anything about founders' shares. Your business card's got the same address as the Marina flyer down at the feed store," Nora said. "Same suite number and everything." Kessler's smile thinned out to almost nothing. "It's a generous offer, Ms. Vance. Land like this, in a floodplain, it isn't worth much to anybody but a very specific kind of buyer. Then it's a good thing I'm not selling to just anybody," Nora said. "I'm not selling at all." "You understand the county could still deny your redemption," Kessler said. "Paperwork gets complicated around tax sales. Things get lost, delayed. Is that a threat, Mr. Kessler, or a promise?" He didn't answer that one straight. He reached into his jacket instead and came out with a card, held it out to her like a peace offering. "Think it over. The offer's good till the walkthrough." "I don't need to think it over," Nora said, not taking the card, "but I'll tell you something for free. Whatever's driving this hurry of yours, it's not $18,000 worth of kindness." Kessler put the card back in his pocket, got in his clean car, and drove off without another word, slower over the gravel than a man that nervous should have managed. Gus came back up from where Ansel's truck had turned onto the road, watching the black sedan go the other way. "Who was that?" "Roy Kessler," Nora said, "offering $18,000 to make me disappear before the walkthrough." Gus's eyebrows went up slow. 18. "That's not a bank number, that's a scared number." "He said paperwork gets lost around tax sales," Nora said. "Said it real polite, like it wasn't a threat." "It was a threat," Gus said. "Dressed nice, but a threat." He looked toward the road a moment, jaw working. Means they're worried about something bigger than a locksmith poking around a cellar. Means they know the walkthrough's the day it all comes apart, Nora said, or they're scared it might. It was 2 days after that when Nora finally understood who'd been walking the creek bank all those weeks back, the man in the orange vest she'd seen twice from her tow truck and never thought twice about. She was down at the bait shop counter restocking crickets when old Merle Tatum came in for minnows and started talking before she could even ring him up. "They's a fella out there with a transit and a orange vest," Merle said, "measuring your creek line again this morning. Third time I seen him this month. Told me himself he's doing the survey for the marina folks. Said Wade Renner hired him clear back in the spring." "Spring," Nora said. "That's before I even took the shack." "Said the whole plan's contingent on 42 acres of frontage," Merle said, counting out crumpled bills for his minnows. "Said if that acreage don't clear title, whole marina deal's dead in the water." His words, not mine. Nora rang up the sale with her hands steadier than she felt. 42 acres, she said. "That's the exact number in Hollis's estate." "Didn't say nothing about that," Merle said, already halfway out the door with his bucket. "Just said it's contingent." She called Gus the second Merle's truck cleared the lot. "They've had a surveyor out there since spring," she said. "Wade already had this planned before Hollis was even 6 months in the ground. Before you ever stood on that courthouse lawn," Gus said, quiet. "Man appraised the shack at $900 and never once mentioned he'd already hired a surveyor for a marina he was fixing to build on land he didn't clear own." "That's fraud," Nora said. "Isn't it?" "That's for a judge to say," Gus said. "But it's not an accident. Man like that doesn't survey land he's not already counting as his." Nora looked out the shop window at the creek running low and brown past the bridge, the same water that had carried Hollis's numbers for 50 years, the same water that was about to carry a lot more than that. "The walkthrough's in 11 days, she said. "Then we've got 11 days, Gus said, "to make sure everybody who needs to see that vault open is standing in that cellar when it happens. County rep, that inspector's paperwork, if it comes to it. And you, holding that logbook like it's scripture, because it is." "And Wade," Nora said. "Especially Wade," Gus said. "A man ought to be there to watch the exact thing he swore was worthless turn out to be the reason he loses everything." Nora hung up the phone and stood a minute in the quiet of the shop, Roscoe's tags jingling somewhere out back where he was working at something in the dirt again, some old habit he never seemed to grow out of. She thought about Kessler's card still sitting untouched on her porch rail, about the surveyor out there with his transit measuring water she'd measured herself every Sunday for 6 years, about Hollis's handwriting on a postcard telling her not to trust what a thing looked like from the top. She went and got the logbook down off the shelf, opened it to the last page Hollis had written before his hand got too unsteady to write straight, and read it over again like it might tell her something new the 4th time through. It didn't. But it didn't need to. She already knew the numbers. 43, 91, 12, 2. She could recite them in her sleep now, and in 11 days she was going to say them out loud in front of a county rep and a cousin who'd called her inheritance worthless to her face. Wade came to the bait shop himself 2 days later, not the shack, and he didn't bother pretending it was about minnows. He stood at the counter while Nora rang up a customer, waited until the man left, then set both hands flat on the glass case like he owned it. "You sent an inspector out there," he said. "Cost me nothing to guess who paid for that." "Ansel Doyle," Nora said, "cleared the cellar, filed it with the county same day. That complaint was legitimate. It was a stall, Wade, and it didn't even work." He looked thinner than he had at the courthouse, the collar of his shirt a little loose on his neck, like the last few weeks had eaten something off him that sleep wasn't giving back. "You think I've got time to be petty with you? I've got investors calling my house at 9 at night." Nora went still. Investors. Wade caught himself half a second too late. "Bank clients," he said. "Not your business." "Founders' shares aren't bank business," Nora said. "Merle Tatum told me about the surveyor. Roy Kessler told me about the marina, more or less, without meaning to. You want to tell me the rest, or you want me to keep finding it out from other people?" Wade's jaw worked. For a second she thought he might actually say it, whatever it was sitting behind his eyes, heavy enough to bend his shoulders. Then he straightened up instead. "You don't know what you're sitting on," he said. "I think I've got a decent idea." "You've got a shack," Wade said. A shack and a dog and 30 days. That's all you've got, Nora. Whatever you think is under there, it's not going to matter once the county gavels that sale. Funny, Nora said, because you keep showing up like it already matters. He left without buying anything, the bell over the door jangling behind him harder than it needed to. Gus heard about it that evening over the phone, and he didn't sound surprised so much as satisfied, the way a man sounds when a plan he already suspected starts showing itself in daylight. Investors calling him at home, Gus said. That's not a man sitting easy on a marina deal. That's a man who's already spent money he doesn't have yet. He said 30 days like it was still working against me. It might be, Gus said. That's the part that worries me. County can gavel a sale even with an open vault if nobody official's forced to look at what's in it. We need more than an inspector's signature, Nora. We need somebody from the courthouse standing in that cellar the day of the walkthrough, no way around it. The county rep who does the appraisal walk, Nora said. Wade's own bank set that appointment. Then we make sure that appointment happens exactly the way it's supposed to, Gus said. No delays, no rescheduling, no more surprise complaints. You call the assessor's office tomorrow and you confirm that date in writing. Get a name. Get a badge number if they'll give you one. You think Wade'll try to move it. I think a man that's scared will try anything, Gus said. Best thing we can do is make the ground so solid under our feet he can't find a crack to push on. Nora called first thing the next morning, and the woman on the other end of the line was brisk but not unkind. The kind of voice that had said the same sentence 1,000 times and worn it smooth. The walkthrough was confirmed. Same date, same time. A rep named Carol Bevins would conduct it, county seal, official capacity, no way to slide it sideways without a judge's order. Nora wrote the name down on the inside cover of Hollis's logbook, right under the numbers, like it belonged there. 3 days after that, a woman Nora had never seen before walked into the bait shop wearing sandals that weren't built for gravel and asking careful questions about property values along the creek. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said. "I bought into a development project a few months back. Sable Creek Marina. I'm just trying to understand the timeline now, since I haven't heard much lately." Nora set down the bag of crickets she'd been weighing. "You bought shares. $5,000. The woman said, a little embarrassed to say the number out loud. "My husband thought it was a good opportunity. Waterfront's supposed to be scarce around here." "It is," Nora said. "Some of it's mine." The woman blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The frontage they're counting on," Nora said. 42 acres of it belong to my great-uncle. There's a tax sale on part of it in a few weeks, and there's a deed question on the rest that hasn't been settled yet. I wouldn't call that a timeline. I'd call it a problem. The woman's face did something complicated, worry chasing embarrassment, chasing something closer to anger. "Wade Renner told us the land was clear, said it was a formality. Wade Renner told a courthouse full of people my shack wasn't worth financing a dime," Nora said. "You might want to ask him for your $5,000 back before you ask him anything else." The woman left without buying anything either, her sandals slapping fast against the gravel on her way to her car, phone already up at her ear. Gus laughed when Nora told him, a short, dry bark of a laugh that turned serious fast. "That's the 4th person this month asking around about that land," he said. "Wade's shares are coming apart at the seams, and he doesn't even know it yet. Or he does, and he's too far in to stop." "Either way," Nora said, "that's more people who'll want the truth out before the walkthrough, not fewer. Which means more eyes on you the day it happens," Gus said. "Good. Let them look." The days between held together without any single thing going wrong, which felt stranger to Nora than if something had. She kept up her Sunday trips out to the shack even though there was no hound left waiting on her, filled water into an empty bowl anyway out of habit, sat on the porch step with the logbook in her lap, and read Hollis's numbers over until his handwriting felt like her own. Roscoe came with her every time now, and every time he went straight for the same seam in the floor, nose down, tail working like he still didn't trust that the vault was really shut for good. "It's closed, boy," Nora told him one Sunday, scratching behind his ear. "It'll open again soon enough. Just not till the right people are watching." Gus drove out that same afternoon with a folder under his arm, thicker than the one he usually carried. He laid it open on the kitchen table, careful, like it held something breakable. "Talked to a fella in Kingsport does deed research," he said. Asked him to pull whatever's on file for that 42 acres, going back as far as the courthouse keeps records. And? Nothing, Gus said. That's the thing, Nora. Nothing on file at all past a survey plot from 1951. No recorded transfer, no sale, no will filed touching that specific acreage. Whoever's been telling banks and marina investors that land's clear, they've been telling them a story with no paper behind it. Nora sat down slow across from him. So if the deed in that vault says Hollis, she said, there's nothing on record to argue against it. There's nothing on record, period, Gus said, which means whatever's rolled up down there isn't just proof. It's the only proof there is. First deed filed wins, and there hasn't been a first deed filed yet. Wade doesn't know that. Wade's banking on nobody ever checking, Gus said, same as he banked on you not fighting for a $900 shack. Nora looked past him out the window, past the porch, toward the low green run of the creek, catching afternoon light the way it had every summer of her life. Water that had carried Hollis's numbers longer than she'd been alive, and was about to carry the truth of who it actually belonged to. 8 days, she said. 8 days, Gus said, and then we find out what a courthouse looks like when a man's whole story falls out from under him at once. The truck came up the gravel 2 days before the walkthrough, bigger than Kessler's sedan, a logo on the door that read Sable Creek Marina Resort in blue letters over a little painted wave. The man who stepped out was heavier than Kessler, sunburned across the back of his neck, boots that had actually seen mud on them. "You're Nora Vance," he said. "Not a question. I am. You're not Kessler." "Denny Ashworth," he said. "I'm the one actually building the thing Kessler's been trying to talk you off of." Roscoe came around the side of the shack low and stiff-legged, a growl sitting in his chest that hadn't been there for Kessler. Nora put a hand down without looking, and the dog held, watching Ashworth's boots. "I've got $60,000 of pilings already poured on the parcel next to yours," Ashworth said. "Poured in April. Financed against 42 acres of frontage your family's been sitting on since before I was born." "Not my family," Nora said. "Just me." "Your cousin told us the estate was clean," Ashworth said. "Said it twice in writing to my lender." "My cousin also told a courthouse this shack wasn't worth financing a dime," Nora said. "I wouldn't build much on what Wade tells you." Ashworth's jaw worked the way a man's does when he's doing math he doesn't like. "You understand what happens if that frontage doesn't clear," he said. "Bank pulls my draw. Pilings sit there rotting in the water. I've got 40 families who bought in on the promise of a marina, and I've got a foreclosure walkthrough Thursday that might just decide none of it ever gets built. Then I guess Thursday matters to both of us," Nora said. "I'm not here to threaten you," Ashworth said, which was the kind of sentence men said right before they did exactly that. "I'm here because I'd rather buy my way out clean than watch this go to a judge. Name a number." "There isn't one," Nora said. "I told Kessler that. I'll tell you the same. It's not for sale." Ashworth looked at her a long moment like he was trying to find the crack Kessler hadn't. He didn't find it. "People who build things don't like sitting still while paper falls apart under them," he said. "Just so you understand what Thursday means to men like me." "I understand it fine," Nora said. "Means you poured $60,000 on a promise that was never anybody's to make." He got back in the truck without another word, and it took him longer to turn around in her yard than it should have, the tires chewing gravel like he was working off something he couldn't say out loud. Gus heard about it that evening, standing in Nora's kitchen with his hat still on, like he hadn't decided if he was staying. 60,000 in pilings, he said. "That's not paper anymore, that's concrete in the water." "He wasn't scared like Kessler," Nora said. "He was mad." "Mad's worse," Gus said. "Mad men do things scared men wouldn't." He set his hat down finally on the table, sat across from her. "I want to tell you something about that vault before Thursday, and I want you to actually hear it, not just nod at me. I'm listening." "Hollis didn't build a lock that opens easy," Gus said. "Man built cabinets for 30 years, and every one of them had some little trick in it, something that made sure it only worked the one right way. That door downstairs, it's got the same mind behind it. You get those numbers wrong once, it'll reset and let you try again. You get them wrong twice in a row, it seizes." Nora went still. "Seizes how?" "Bolt throws itself and won't back off," Gus said. "I've seen it in smaller work of his. A drawer that jams for good if you force it crooked. That door's the same idea, just built bigger and meaner. He tapped the logbook where it sat closed on the table between them. So Thursday, we don't get to guess. We don't get to fumble it in front of Carol Bevins and Wade Renner, and God knows who else is standing in that cellar. We read those numbers off this book exactly once, and we get it right the first time. 4-3, Nora said, quiet. 9-1, 12-2. That's the ones I know, Gus said. But I want you looking at every entry from that spring one more time before Thursday, not just the last page. Man like Hollis, he didn't waste a number. If there's an order to how he wrote them down, we need to know it cold. They spent that night at the kitchen table with the logbook open between them, the bait shop light left on down the road for no reason but habit. Nora tracing her finger down columns of numbers she'd copied 100 times without ever once wondering why the ink went slightly darker on certain lines. Gus noticed it first. "Look here," he said, turning the book toward her. Every reading he circled twice, not once. That's not accident. Man doesn't circle a number twice unless he means for somebody to notice it later. Nora leaned in. 4-3, circled twice. 9-1, circled twice. 12-2, circled twice. The ink pressed hard enough to nearly tear the page. He wasn't just logging the creek, she said. Slow, like the words were arriving from somewhere else. He was writing me a combination and hiding it in plain sight the whole time. Man built cabinets for 30 years, Gus said again, softer this time, wouldn't expect anything less careful from him. 2 days out, the shareholder woman came back to the bait shop, and this time she wasn't alone. She had a folder under her arm and another woman with her, older, sharper around the eyes, introduced simply as Pat. "We started calling around," the first woman said. "Turns out there's 11 of us bought in on those founders' shares. $55,000 total, near as we can add it up." She set the folder on the counter. "Pat, here's a paralegal." She pulled the marina's financing filings. Pat opened the folder herself. "Wade Renner co-signed the construction loan personally," she said. "Not just as a bank officer, as collateral. If this parcel doesn't clear and the marina folds, he's not just embarrassed. He's underwater on a loan with his own name on it." Nora looked at the numbers a long moment. "So it's not the bank's money he's protecting Thursday," she said. "It's his own neck." "Looks that way," Pat said. "We're not asking you for anything. We just thought you should know what you're actually standing across from." "I appreciate it," Nora said, and meant it more than the words could carry. The women left the folder behind, and Nora set it next to the logbook on the counter. 2 different kinds of proof sitting side by side, one telling her what a man owed, and the other telling her what her uncle had left behind for her to find. Gus called that night, and she read him the numbers from Pat's folder. "Personal collateral," Gus said. "That explains Ashworth's pilings and Wade's investors calling his house at 9 o'clock. Man mortgaged his own name on land he never had clear title to, which means Thursday isn't just about my 30 days anymore," Nora said. "It's about whether Wade Renner still has a job on Friday." "It was always about that, Nora," Gus said. "He just didn't want you to see it plain until now." She sat on the porch step after she hung up, Roscoe's head heavy against her knee, the creek running its low summer sound past the bridge in the dark. She thought about Ashworth's boots in her yard, about Pat's folder full of numbers that weren't hers to worry about, but somehow were anyway, about the ink pressed twice into Hollis's logbook like he'd known, even with his memory going, that somebody would need those numbers spelled out plain one day. She went inside and got the postcard down from where she kept it tucked in the logbook's back cover, read the line again in the porch light before she went to bed. "Don't let them tell you what a thing's worth till you've looked underneath it." 2 days, she thought, 2 more days, and everybody standing in that cellar was going to find out exactly what he meant. Wade came alone the morning before the walkthrough. No truck logo, no folder, just his own sedan crunching up the gravel like it didn't want to be there. Nora was restocking the minnow tanks when she saw him step out, and Roscoe came off the porch fast, a low sound building in his chest before Wade even shut the car door. "Call him off, Nora," Wade said. "I'm not here to fight. He doesn't know that yet." She put a hand on the dog's collar anyway, held him back. "What do you want, Wade?" Wade looked older than he had at the courthouse, thinner around the eyes. "I want to talk before tomorrow happens," he said. "Just the 2 of us. No Gus, no Kessler, no strangers with folders. Say it here then." He glanced at the bait shop window like Gus might be inside it, then back at her. I'll pay your taxes myself, he said. All $1,180 today. And I'll give you $85,000 on top of it cash for the shack and whatever's under it. You never have to see me again. Nora didn't move. You don't even know what's under it. I know it's something, Wade said. You don't fight this hard for a $900 shack unless there's a reason. His voice cracked on the last word, thin as creek ice. I need this to be over, Nora, please. You called it worthless on the courthouse steps, she said. Now you're offering $85,000 to make it disappear. Which one of those was the lie? He didn't answer that. He looked past her, out toward the water, like the creek itself might back him up. My daddy never had clean paper on that frontage, he said, quiet, almost to himself. I knew it before I ever signed anything with Ashworth. Everybody in this family's known it for 60 years and just never said it out loud. Nora felt something settle in her chest, cold and certain. You built a marina deal on land you knew wasn't yours to pledge. I built it on land nobody was ever going to check, Wade said. That's different. Not to a judge it isn't. He rubbed a hand over his face. Denny Ashworth doesn't take news like that easy, he said. Man's got $60,000 sitting in pilings and 40 families who wired him money, on my word. If this goes bad tomorrow, it's not just my job, Nora. He'll come after both of us. Then you should have thought of that before you told him the parcel was clear. I'm trying to fix it, Wade said. $85,000 and it never has to be a public thing. Nobody at the bank finds out I signed my name to something I couldn't back. Nobody's kids lose their college money over a hole in a title. Gus came around the corner of the shop just then, a coil of rope over one shoulder from wherever he'd been working, and stopped when he saw the car. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching, like a man deciding whether to referee or let it run. 85,000's a strange number for a man who called this place not worth financing a dime, Nora said. It's what I could pull together by tonight, Wade said. I don't have more. I don't want your money, Wade. She said it slow, so there'd be no mistaking it. I want you standing in that cellar tomorrow when Carol Bevins does her walkthrough, same as everybody else. His jaw tightened. You don't know what's down there, he said again, softer this time, less a challenge than a plea. You're betting your whole life on a locked door your uncle built when his mind was already going. His mind was going, Nora said. His hands never forgot a thing he built. Gus'll tell you the same. Gus finally spoke from where he stood. Man's cabinets are still square 30 years on, Wade. You want to bet against that? That's your business. Wade looked between them, and something in his face gave up trying to win the conversation. Carol Bevins doesn't answer to me, he said. I can't move her. I can't stop her. I already tried once and it cost me a call from the county I don't want to get again. Tomorrow's happening, whether any of us like it or not. He got back in his car. Before he pulled the door shut, he looked at Nora one more time. I hope for your sake there's nothing down there worth what you're risking, he said, and I hope for mine there's nothing down there at all. He backed out slow, gravel popping under the tires, and was gone before Roscoe stopped growling. Gus set the rope down on the porch rail. $85,000, he said. That's not a man protecting a bank's interest anymore. That's a man trying to buy his own silence. He said his daddy never had clean paper, Nora said. Said it plain, like it didn't even cost him anything to say. It cost him plenty, Gus said. He just doesn't have anything left to spend but the truth. He looked toward the shack, toward the loose plank behind the cooler that neither of them had touched again since the padlock came off. Tomorrow's not a maybe anymore, Nora. Man like that doesn't drive out here with cash in the car, unless he already knows how this ends. That evening the shop stayed open later than usual, more out of restlessness than business. Nora wiped down the counter twice, checked the minnow tanks a third time, kept catching herself looking at the logbook where it sat by the register. Gus came by after supper with a battery lantern and a small canvas bag of tools he set on the counter without a word. In case that door doesn't want to cooperate easy, he said. Sometimes a hinge needs convincing, even after the numbers are right. You think it'll still work? After all these years? Hollis built things to last, Gus said. Only thing that ever failed him was his own memory, and even that held onto the numbers longer than it held onto most everything else. He tapped the logbook cover. That tells you something about how much this mattered to him. Nora opened it to the last page, the one with the ink pressed twice into 439112. She'd read those numbers so many times now they didn't look like numbers anymore. They looked like a voice. Carol Bevins is supposed to be here by 9, she said. You think Wade shows up too? He has to, Gus said. Bank's got a man required at these things. Questions whether he shows up hoping the door doesn't open or hoping it does. Does it matter? Not to us, Gus said. Door's opening either way. He picked up the lantern and checked the batteries out of habit, clicking it on and off once in the dim shop light. Outside, Roscoe had already settled by the porch steps like he knew something was coming that he wasn't going to miss, chin on his paws, eyes open in the dark. Nora latched the register, turned off the shop lights, and stood a minute on the gravel looking down the road toward the shack, a shape barely visible against the tree line, patient the way it had been patient for 6 years of Sunday visits nobody but her had made. Get some sleep if you can, Gus said, heading for his truck. Tomorrow's going to want you steady. I don't think I'll sleep much. Didn't figure you would, he said. Neither will I. He climbed into the truck, paused with the door open. Bring the logbook. Bring the postcard too, if you want it in your pocket. Man ought to have something of his with him when his work finally gets to speak. Nora watched his taillights disappear around the bend, then walked back inside and picked up the logbook from the counter, holding it the way she might hold something alive. She thought of Hollis's hands on the porch rail all those Sundays, steady even when his eyes had stopped finding her name. She thought of the postcard's line, worn soft at the fold from how many times she'd read it. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow the door finds out what it's been keeping. The morning came in gray, low fog sitting on the creek like it didn't want to leave either. Nora was up before 6, coffee untouched on the counter, logbook and postcard both tucked in her jacket pocket like Gus had told her. Roscoe wouldn't settle. He paced the porch, then the yard, then back to the porch, nose down at the seam behind the cooler like he already knew what today was. You and me both, Nora told him. Gus pulled in at 7:30, his truck bed loaded with the canvas tool bag and a car battery lantern strapped down with rope. He didn't say good morning. He just looked at her face and nodded once, like he'd already read what he needed there. Sleep any? He asked. Some. Liar. He almost smiled. Me neither. Carol Bevins arrived at 9:05, driving a county car with a magnetic seal on the door, a clipboard already out before she'd cut the engine. She was younger than Nora expected, maybe 40, with the flat, unhurried manner of someone who'd done 100 of these walkthroughs and stopped being surprised by any of them. Ms. Vance, she said, shaking Nora's hand, I've got your file. 30-day redemption period closes tomorrow at close of business. This is just the county's look before that clock runs out. I understand, Nora said. Mr. Renner's required to be present as the bank's representative, Carol said, glancing toward the road. He called ahead, said he'd be a few minutes behind. Gus set the tool bag on the porch step. We'll be ready when he gets here. Wade's sedan came around the bend at 9:20, and behind it, close enough that it might as well have been tied on with rope, came Denny Ashworth's truck. Nora felt her stomach drop before either door opened. He wasn't invited, she said to Gus. Don't guess that ever stopped him. Wade got out first, tie loosened already like he'd fought with it the whole drive. Ashworth climbed down after him, boots hitting gravel hard, a folder of his own under one arm this time. Ms. Vance, Ashworth said, no hello in it. I called the county this morning. Turns out anybody with a financial interest in this parcel's outcome is entitled to observe. I've got a financial interest. Carol Bevins looked up from her clipboard, unbothered. He's not wrong about the statute, she said. I don't love it, but he's not wrong. Fine, Nora said. Let him watch. Wade wouldn't meet her eyes. He stood a little apart from Ashworth, hands in his pockets, looking at the shack like it had already cost him something and was fixing to cost him more. Carol clicked her pen. Let's walk it. Exterior first, then inside. She moved around the shack slow, making notes, tapping the porch post, checking the roofline. Nora walked beside her, answering questions in short sentences. Gus trailed with the tool bag. Wade and Ashworth stayed back near the trucks, not talking to each other, both watching like men waiting on a verdict. Inside, the shop smelled like bait and old wood, same as always. Carol's flashlight passed over the shelves, the register, the minnow tanks. Any structural concerns you're aware of? She asked. Not that I know of, Nora said. The floor's solid. My uncle kept this place up right till the end. Carol nodded, wrote something down. Then she looked toward the cooler, toward the plank that had been pried and set back so many times now it barely sat flush. What's back there? Nora's throat went tight. This was it. There's a cellar, she said. Root cellar, from when the place was built. I'd like you to see it before we finish. Carol frowned, curious more than suspicious. All right. Wade's voice came from the doorway, sharper than she'd heard it in weeks. That's not part of a tax walkthrough, Carol. She's trying to turn this into a show. It's part of the property, Carol said, not looking up. If it's on the parcel, I look at it. That's the job. Ashworth stepped inside behind Wade, folder still under his arm, eyes moving over the shop like he was pricing the boards. Gus knelt by the cooler and worked the plank free with a flat bar, quiet and practiced, like he'd done it a dozen times instead of twice. The trapdoor sat there in the gap, iron ring cold and dull in the flashlight beam, HR 1959 stamped plain across the hasp. Carol crouched down, ran a finger over the stamp. That's not county issue. That's older than the county's ever documented on this parcel. My uncle built it, Nora said. 1959. Well, Carol stood back up. Let's see where it goes. Gus lifted the door on its hinge, and the smell came up cool and mineral, the same breath of dug earth Nora remembered from the first time. The concrete steps waited below, steady as they'd always been. Wade hung back near the register, arms crossed tight. Nora, don't do this in front of everybody. Do what, Wade? Whatever you think you're about to find. His voice cracked thin. Just don't. Ashworth pushed past him toward the opening, impatient. I didn't drive out here to watch a family argument. Let's see the cellar. Carol went down first, flashlight steady, boots careful on the old concrete. Nora followed, then Gus with the lantern and his tool bag, then Wade, slower, like each step cost him something. Ashworth came last, ducking his head under the low frame. The cellar opened up cooler than the shop above, dirt walls braced with timber gone silver with age, and at the far end, the door. Carol's flashlight found it and stopped there. The steel caught the light flat and gray. No handle, no keyhole, no dial anybody could see. That's not a root cellar door, she said slowly. That's a vault door. It is, Gus said. Man built it himself. I helped him haul the steel plate out here back in the 60s. Never asked what it was for. Didn't seem my business then. Ashworth's flashlight swept over it, and for the first time since he'd walked onto her land, his voice lost its edge. That's real steel, he said. That's not decoration. Carol turned to Nora. You have a way to open this? Nora pulled the logbook from her jacket, hands not quite steady. I think I do. Wade's face had gone pale in the lantern light, some calculation running behind his eyes that nobody else in the room could follow yet. Nora, he said, quiet now, almost pleading. Whatever's behind that door. Once it's open for everybody standing here. You understand that? I do, Nora said. She opened the logbook to the last page, the ink pressed twice into 3 numbers her uncle had circled like he was shouting from somewhere she couldn't see. That's kind of the point, Wade. Gus set the lantern on the floor, angled up at the door, and looked at Nora the way he might have looked at Hollis 30 years back, waiting on the next cut. Read them off slow, he said. We don't get a second try. Nora's finger found the first circled number. 4-3. Behind her, Carol Bevins had gone still, pen forgotten in her hand, and even Ashworth had stopped moving, like the whole cellar was holding its breath along with her. Nora's finger found the first circled number, 4-3. She said it out loud, slow, the way Hollis used to write it. Gus knelt by the door. He didn't touch anything yet. His eyes moved over the steel, hunting for what only he'd know how to find. There, he said. He pressed a thumb against a rivet head no bigger than a dime, tucked under the hinge plate. It gave just barely and turned. That's the first number, he said. He hid the dial inside the hinge. Man never did a lock the easy way in his life. Nora read the second number, 9-1. Gus found a second rivet lower down disguised as part of the seam weld. It clicked when it turned, soft, almost gentle. Carol Bevins had stopped writing altogether. Her flashlight beam held steady on Gus's hands like she didn't want to blink and miss it. Last one, Nora said. 12-2. The third rivet sat dead center under a strip of steel that looked to anyone who hadn't spent 30 years building things beside Hollis Renner, like a manufacturer's stamp. Gus turned it. Something inside the door shifted, a low sound. Metal sliding against metal, like a bolt finding its home after a long time away. Nobody moved. "Go on," Gus said quietly. "It's yours to open, Nora. Not mine." She set the logbook down on the dirt floor. Careful, like it might still be needed. She gripped the iron ring welded into the door's face and pulled. It didn't fight her the way she'd braced for. It swung on oiled hinges, slow and even, like it had been waiting on this exact morning. The cold came out first. Then the smell, dust and metal, and something like a cellar that had never once let the outside in. Carol's flashlight swept the inside, and her breath caught audibly. Coffee cans lined the near wall, a dozen of them, lids pressed down tight, dates written on masking tape gone brittle and yellow. Behind them sat a strongbox, unlocked, lid slightly ajar. And in a niche cut into the back wall, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with twine, a rolled bundle of paper sat like it had been placed there on purpose, meant to be found. "Lord," Ashworth said, from the doorway. It wasn't greed in his voice, it was something closer to fear. Gus reached in and lifted one coffee can, weighed it in both hands, then tipped it slightly so the flashlight caught inside. Silver dollars, packed tight, a soft gray shine that hadn't dulled in 60 years underground. "Morgan dollars, most of these," Gus said. "Some peace dollars mixed in. Man was putting these away since before I ever met him." Carol crouched beside the can, careful, professional. "How many cans did you count?" 12, Nora said. "If they're all packed like that one." Carol did quick math in her head, lips moving. "Conservative, melt value alone. You're looking at $18,000–$20,000 in silver. Collector value on some of these dates could run it a good bit higher." Wade made a sound in his throat, not quite a word. "That's not the part that matters," Gus said. He was looking at the bundle in the niche, not the coins. Nora reached in and lifted it out. The oilcloth had kept the damp off. She untied the twine with fingers that didn't want to cooperate, and the paper underneath unrolled stiff, cracking gently at the folds. It was a deed, handwritten in places, typed in others, a county seal pressed faint into the corner, dated in ink gone brown with age. 1959. Carol took it from her, careful as a nurse, and angled it into the flashlight beam. She read for a long moment. Nobody said anything. "This conveys 42 acres of creek frontage," Carol said slowly, adjoining this parcel. "Grantee is listed as Hollis Renner, sole owner." She looked up. "This was never filed with the county, never recorded," Gus said. "That's why nobody's known about it in 60 years. A deed that's never recorded might as well be a rumor, far as the courthouse cares. But it's still good paper if the signatures hold." Wade had gone white. "That's not possible," he said. "That land's been folded into the estate parcel for decades. My father paid taxes on it. Paying taxes on land don't make you own it," Gus said. "Man can pay taxes on his neighbor's dog, too. Don't make the dog his." Carol turned the deed over, checking the back, the notary stamp, a second signature beneath Hollis's. "This is witnessed and notarized," she said. "If the notary seal checks out with county records, and I don't see why it wouldn't from 59, this is valid. It just needed filing." 42 acres, Ashworth said. His voice had lost every bit of its hard edge. "That's the frontage. That's the whole stretch I financed the pilings on." "You finance pilings on land the estate never had clear title to," Carol said. "Not unkindly, just plain. That's between you and Mr. Renner." Ashworth turned on Wade, folder falling out from under his arm, papers spilling onto the dirt floor. "You told me this parcel was clean. You told me your daddy held it outright." "I thought he did," Wade said, and for the first time since Nora had known him as an adult, he sounded like a child caught in something too big to talk his way out of. $60,000 in pilings, Ashworth said. 40 families' deposits. You had me build a marina on ground that belonged to a dead man's shack the whole time." "I didn't know," Wade said. "I swear to you, I didn't know there was a deed." "You knew the frontage was never clean," Nora said. "You told me that yourself, in your car, yesterday. You said your daddy never had clean paper. You just didn't know why." Wade didn't answer. He looked at the deed in Carol's hands like it was a living thing that had crawled up out of the ground to accuse him personally. Carol straightened, all business again, though her hands weren't quite steady. "I need to photograph this in place before anything moves," she said. "Then it goes to the courthouse today. If this is what it looks like, it changes the county's whole file on this parcel." "Today," Wade said. "It has to be today?" "Mr. Renner, a document like this doesn't wait," Carol said. "Not when there's already a lien recorded against land it contradicts. The longer it sits unfiled, the messier this gets for everybody, including your bank." Gus had picked up the strongbox lid and was looking inside it now, at a slim stack of folded paper tucked beneath a rubber band gone brittle with age. He pulled it out, unfolded it, and went still. "Nora," he said, "you want to see this." She took it from him. It was a single-page, handwriting she knew now as well as her own, the same hand that had written the postcard, the same hand that had pressed those 3 numbers twice into the logbook. Her name was on it, not Wade's, hers. "To whoever finds this after me," it read, "I expect it'll be Nora, since she's the only one who ever came back on a Sunday without being asked. This land and what's under it goes to whoever keeps the water level." That was always the test. Wade never once asked what the numbers meant. Nora's throat closed up. She read it twice before she trusted her own voice. "He knew," she said quietly. "He knew I'd be the one." Gus put a hand on her shoulder, brief, steady. Man wasn't confused near as much as everybody thought, he said. He just stopped talking to people who quit showing up. Carol was already photographing the deed with her phone, page by page, careful and quick. Ashworth had gone to sit on the cellar steps, head in his hands, folder still scattered on the dirt where he'd dropped it. Wade stood apart from all of it, staring at the open vault like it had personally ruined him, which Nora thought it more or less had. "I need everyone out of this cellar in the next 10 minutes, Carol said. "I'm sealing it as evidence of record until the deed's filed and the parcels resurveyed. Nobody touches the cans, nobody touches the strongbox." "It's my property," Nora said. "It is," Carol said. "And in about 4 hours, once this is filed, it's going to be a very different kind of property than it was this morning." She looked at Nora for a second longer than the moment required. "You should be at the courthouse when I file this. Every hour it's not on record is an hour somebody could still try something." "Somebody like who?" Nora said, though she already had a name for it. Carol didn't answer that directly. She just glanced toward Ashworth on the steps, then toward Wade, and let the silence say it. Gus lifted the lantern and started up the concrete stairs first, boots careful on the old steps, same as they'd been careful on the way down. "Let's get this filed before lunch," he said. "Man waited 60 years. I don't figure we need to give it one more hour than it's got left." Nora rolled the deed back into its oilcloth, gentle, the way she'd have handled something alive, and followed him up into the daylight, the note in her uncle's hand still folded tight in her other fist. The truck bed still had morning dew on it when Gus climbed in, lantern between his boots. Nora sat up front with the deed on her lap, wrapped tight in its oilcloth again, like she could keep the cold of that cellar inside it a little longer. Carol Bevins followed in her county car. Wade trailed behind her in his, alone, no radio on, hands white on the wheel the whole way into town. Sable Creek's courthouse sat 2 blocks off Route 9, brick gone soft pink with age, the flag out front snapping in a wind that smelled like rain coming. Nora had passed that building 1,000 times hauling wrecks off the low-water bridge. She'd never once walked in carrying something that mattered. Carol didn't wait for anybody. She went straight through the doors to the recorder's office, deed in a manila folder now, photographs already backed up on her phone twice over. "I want this log the second I hand it across that counter," she said. "Chain of custody, timestamp, all of it." The clerk behind the counter, a woman named Peggy Austin, who'd sold Nora fishing licenses since she was 12, looked up over her glasses. "Carol Bevins bringing me something exciting for once." "Must be Christmas." "Might be," Carol said. "Need you to pull the parcel file for the old Renner estate while you're at it." Wade came through the doors a minute behind them, Ashworth right on his heels, both men moving like they'd rather be anywhere else and couldn't stop themselves from coming anyway. "Wade Renner," Peggy said, surprised. "Don't usually see you on this side of the counter." "Just here to observe," Wade said. His voice had none of its bank polish left in it. Peggy took the folder from Carol, laid the deed flat under the counterlight and read it slow, lips moving. She got to the date, the seal, the second signature, and her eyebrows went up over her glasses. "This is a real notary stamp," she said. "59. I'd need to pull the notary registry to confirm, but that's an authentic seal pattern from back then. County switch styles in 63. She looked up. "Where's this been sitting?" "Under my great-uncle's shack," Nora said, "since the year it's dated. Peggy set it down like it might bruise." "Well, if the notary registry backs this seal, and the signatures hold against anything we've got on file for Hollis Renner, this is a valid conveyance. Just never recorded." She glanced at Carol. "You want me to log it now?" "Log it now," Carol said. Peggy pulled a stamp, inked it, pressed it into the corner of the deed with a sound that seemed too small for what it meant. She wrote the date, the time, a file number, her own initials beside it. 42 acres of creek frontage, she read aloud, mostly to herself, conveyed to Hollis Renner, sole owner, 1959. She looked up at Wade. "That parcel number's the same one carrying a construction lien right now." "Sable Creek Trust, is that right?" "That's right," Wade said quietly. "Then somebody's got some phone calls to make," Peggy said, not unkind, just a woman who'd seen paperwork undo people before and didn't relish it but wasn't going to pretend otherwise either. Ashworth had gone very still by the door, folder hanging from one hand like it had stopped being useful the second Peggy stamped that seal. "This is recorded," he said, "officially, right now." "Officially, right now," Peggy said. 10:41 in the morning if anybody's asking. "Then I need to talk to my attorney," Ashworth said, and walked straight back out the door without another word to Wade, without so much as a glance, phone already up at his ear before the door swung shut behind him. Wade watched him go and didn't move to follow. He stood in the middle of the recorder's office like a man who'd just watched his own ride leave without him. "Wade," Nora said. He turned to her, and for a second the loan officer was gone completely, and there was just her cousin, 34 years old, looking like the floor had opened under him same as it had under her. "I didn't lie to him on purpose," Wade said. "I believed it. I believed the land was clean because that's what I grew up believing. Daddy never once said otherwise." "Your daddy knew," Nora said. "He just never recorded it either way. Maybe he figured nobody'd ever look. Or he figured I'd never need to know," Wade said. His voice cracked on the last word, and he pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes for a second, quick, like he could push the whole morning back down. "I appraised that shack at $900, Nora. I stood on the courthouse steps and told the whole county it wasn't worth financing a dime." "I remember," Nora said. "She didn't say it cruel. She didn't have to." "There's more under that shack than everything Daddy left me," Wade said. "Everything. And I'm the one who told you to take it because I figured it was garbage." Carol had stepped back to give them room, folder tucked under her arm, watching the two of them the way she might watch weather rolling in, patient, professional, not about to interrupt something that wasn't hers. "You've got a marina deal," Nora said. 40 families' deposits," Ashworth said. "What happens to that now?" Wade let out a breath that had no humor in it at all. "It happens to fall apart," he said. "Financing was contingent on clear collateral." Clear collateral just walked out that door with a phone in his hand. He shook his head slow. 60,000 in pilings already poured, deposits already spent on permits. Ashworth's going to need that land to still be his, and it's not. And there's no fixing that with a phone call. "That's not my problem to fix," Nora said. "No," Wade said. "It's not." He looked at her a long moment, something working behind his eyes that looked almost like relief, strange as that was to see on him. "You know the worst part? I used to come out to that shack when I was a kid, before Daddy and Uncle Hollis stopped speaking. There was a hound then, too. Different one." He almost smiled, and it looked like it hurt him to do it. "I used to fill that same water bowl." "You stopped," Nora said. "Not an accusation. Just the fact of it, laid down plain." "I stopped," Wade said. "Kids do that. Then you're grown, and you don't know how to start again. And somebody younger than you just keeps doing the thing you quit, quiet, every Sunday, for 6 years, and you don't even notice until there's a vault under her floor with her name on the note inside it instead of yours." Nora didn't have an answer for that one. She just held the oilcloth bundle a little tighter and let the silence sit. Peggy cleared her throat gently from behind the counter, still holding the deed like a woman minding a nest of eggs. "I'll need the parcel resurveyed before this goes final into the tax rolls," she said. "County surveyor can likely get out there inside a week, not longer. But as of this stamp, Ms. Vance, that frontage reads as belonging to the estate of Hollis Renner, and you're the sole heir of record on that shack and its contents." "What about the lien?" Carol said. "The one that's supposed to fall due on the shack parcel in 30 days. Peggy pulled a second file, flipped it open, ran a finger down a column of numbers. $1,218, with penalties, she said. "That's still owed regardless of what's under the floor. Vault contents don't erase a tax bill. They just mean you can afford to pay it now." She glanced up, almost smiling. "I'd imagine you can." "I can," Nora said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Bring a cashier's check by Friday and we'll close it out clean," Peggy said. "No auction, no lien, no cousin's name anywhere on it but yours." Wade flinched at that. Small, quick, gone as fast as it came. He didn't argue it. Outside, the wind had picked up, clouds stacking gray over the tree line toward the creek. Gus was leaning against the truck bed, arms crossed, waiting like he already knew how it would come out before anybody told him. "Well," he said when Nora and Carol came down the courthouse steps. "It's recorded," Nora said. "Deed's good. Land's mine, long as the notary registry backs the seal, and Peggy seemed to think it would." Gus nodded slow, like a man closing out a job he'd waited a long time to finish. "Hollis'd be about unbearable right now," he said. "Man never did like being wrong about people, but he sure did enjoy being right about paperwork." Wade came down the steps last, slower than anybody, phone buzzing in his pocket, already lit up with a name Nora didn't recognize. "That's the bank," he said, looking at the screen. "Regional office." He didn't answer it right away. He looked at Nora instead. "This is going to cost me my job. You understand that? Maybe more than that." "I didn't put that deed under the floor, Wade," Nora said. "Your own daddy did, 60 years before either one of us had a say in it." "I know," Wade said quietly. "I know that." The phone kept buzzing. He finally answered it, turned away, walked a few steps toward his car with it pressed to his ear, and his voice, when it started, had already gone thin and careful in a way Nora had never once heard from him before. Carol watched him go, then turned back to Nora, tucking her clipboard under her arm. "I'll get the resurvey moving," she said. "And for what it's worth, Ms. Vance, I've walked a lot of foreclosure properties in this county, never once found what you found under one." "Wasn't luck," Gus said, climbing into the truck. "Man built that door with his own 2 hands so it'd wait for somebody who'd actually come looking." He looked at Nora over the hood, something steady and warm in his face. "You came looking every Sunday for 6 years before you even knew there was a door." Nora looked back toward the courthouse, the flag snapping harder now against the coming rain, and thought of a postcard with a Creektown postmark, 3 words in her uncle's hand that had turned out to mean a great deal more than she'd ever let herself believe. "Don't let them tell you what a thing's worth." She got in the truck beside Gus, deed safe on her lap, and for the first time since the auctioneer's gavel had come down on a $900 shack, she let herself believe the worst of it was over, even knowing there was still plenty of Sable Creek left that hadn't heard the news yet. Friday came in gray and close, rain sitting just behind the ridgeline without ever quite falling. Nora walked into the recorder's office at 9 sharp with a cashier's check in her hand, made out for $1,218. Peggy Osteen took it, counted the zeros twice out of habit, and stamped the file paid in full. "No lien," Peggy said. "No auction. Clean parcel, Ms. Vance, front to back." She slid a receipt across the counter. "First time in 11 years I've stamped one of these with a smile on my face." "Feels different this time," Nora said. "It ought to," Peggy said. "Most folks who walk in here paying back taxes look like they're bleeding out. You look like you just bought the place twice." Gus was waiting outside on the courthouse steps, an old velvet-lined case tucked under one arm, the kind jewelers use for rings, except this one was scuffed gray and had traveled 60 years to get here. "Coin man's setting up at the feed store," Gus said. "Told him bring his scale and his loop both." "You didn't tell me there was a coin man," Nora said. "Didn't want you sitting up nights guessing a number before it was a real one," Gus said. "Man's driven over from Knoxville twice for smaller finds than this. Name's Earl Tice. Doesn't get excited about much. You'll see." They drove out together, silver dollars riding in coffee cans wrapped in towels in the truck bed, like church casseroles nobody wanted to admit were worth more than the truck itself. Earl Tice had cleared a folding table in the back room of the feed store, scale on one end, a loop, and a stack of reference books on the other. He was a small man, neat, with reading glasses pushed up into thinning hair, and he didn't say much of anything for the first 20 minutes. He just worked, can by can, coin by coin, sorting them into stacks by date, flipping each one under a little lamp, writing numbers on a legal pad in handwriting almost as careful as Hollis's own. Gus leaned against the wall the whole time, arms crossed, saying nothing, which for Gus was its own kind of loud. Earl finally sat back, took his glasses off, rubbed his eyes. "You know what you got here?" he said. "That's what we're here to find out," Nora said. "Morgan dollars mostly," Earl said. "Some peace dollars mixed in the back cans. Dates run from the 1890s clean through 1921. Some of these are common. A lot of these are not." He tapped one stack. "This run right here, the New Orleans mint marks in this condition, I haven't seen a hoard like it outside an estate sale in Charleston 6 years back." "Just tell her the number, Earl," Gus said. "She's been up since 5. Earl looked at his legal pad one more time, like he wanted to be sure before he said it out loud. Conservatively, he said, "You're looking at $280,000. Could run higher once the rare dates go to auction properly. Could run a good bit higher." Nobody in that back room said anything for a second. Even Gus's arms came uncrossed. $280,000, Nora said, like saying it slower might make it smaller. "That's coffee cans," Earl said. "Just the coffee cans." Gus finally smiled, small and tired and real. "Man used to tell me silver never lies to you," he said. Guess he meant it literal. Carol Bevins found them there an hour later, boots still muddy from the creek bank, a folded survey map under one arm. "County surveyor finished the resurvey early," she said. 42 acres confirmed, clean chain of title back to the 59 deed. She spread the map on the folding table next to Earl's coin stacks. "There's something else you should know before this gets loud." "Louder than this?" Nora said, glancing at the coins. "The State Transportation Office confirmed the new bridge easement route this week," Carol said. "It runs along this exact creek frontage. Once that's public record, and it will be inside 30 days, land like this doesn't sell for farmland money anymore." She tapped the map. "I've seen 2 comparable parcels go for close to $60,000 an acre once an easement like this gets announced." Gus did the math out loud before Nora could. 42 acres, he said. "That's pushing $2.5 million easy once word's out." 2.4, 2.5, Carol said, "somewhere in there, plus what's already in those cans." She looked at Nora steady. Wade's marina deal was betting on that exact easement to make the resort worth building. He knew the value was coming. He just never had clean paper to hold it with. Nora sat down slow in the one folding chair the feed store had, the silver dollars gleaming dull under Earl's little lamp, and thought about a $900 shack and a cousin who'd called it worthless on the courthouse steps not 2 months back. "He appraised it before he knew what was under it," Nora said, "but he knew about the bridge." "He knew about the bridge," Carol said. "That's the part that's going to matter to a lot of people real soon." It mattered to Ashworth first. He came looking for Wade 2 days later. Not at the bank, but at the diner on Route 9 where half the county ate lunch, loud enough that booths went quiet around them. 40 families, Ashworth said, not sitting, standing over Wade's table with his jaw tight. 40 families put deposits into Blue Water Landing believing you when you told them the land was clear. I've got $60,000 of poured pilings sitting on ground you never owned free and clear. I told you what I believed, Wade said. You're a loan officer, Ashworth said. Belief isn't your job. Paper is your job. He dropped a folded letter on the table, hard enough that silverware jumped. That's from my attorney. We're pursuing recovery on every dollar of those deposits, starting with your signature on the collateral agreement. The whole diner was watching by then. Fork stopped halfway. Wade sitting there in his tie with nowhere to look that didn't have eyes on it. I'm not the one who forged anything, Wade said quietly. No, Ashworth said. You're just the one who signed off on land that was never yours to pledge. That's enough. He straightened his jacket, looked around at the room like he'd only just noticed it was watching, and walked out without ordering. Wade sat there a long moment, coffee going cold in front of him, before he put cash on the table and left too, out the back, the way a man leaves when he doesn't want to be walked to his car by anybody's eyes. The regional office called him again that same afternoon. Nora heard about it secondhand, from Peggy, who heard it from someone at the bank, the way news moves through Sable Creek faster than any of the roads do. Wade wasn't fired outright. He was put on leave pending review, his name pulled off every active loan file in the branch, his office door left open like nobody trusted him behind a closed one anymore. Nora didn't feel triumphant hearing it. She felt something closer to tired, the way you feel after a long tow job finally comes loose from a ditch, more relief than victory. She drove back out to the shack that evening, same road she'd driven every Sunday for 6 years, past the low-water bridge, past the feed store, past the bank with its lights still burning even though it was well past closing. Gus's truck was already parked out front when she pulled up, tailgate down, a bundle of new cedar shingles stacked in the bed. "Figured we'd start on the roof before the next rain gets ambitious," Gus said. "That old tin's been patched more than it's been whole." Buck came off the porch to meet her, tail going, same as every Sunday, except this time there wasn't a bill collector's envelope waiting on the step and there wasn't a $900 price tag hanging over any of it anymore. Nora filled his water bowl anyway, out of habit more than need now, and sat down on the porch steps next to Gus, looking out at 42 acres of creek frontage that had been quietly worth more than anybody's imagination the whole time anybody could remember. "He'd have liked watching all this," Nora said. "He'd have liked it better if it hadn't taken 60 years and a dog with a bad habit," Gus said. But he was smiling when he said it, and out past the tree line the creek kept running the same low, easy sound it had been running the whole time nobody was paying attention. 2 weeks later, Wade Renner came out to the shack on a Tuesday evening, driving his own truck instead of the bank's leased sedan. He didn't call ahead. Buck barked once from the porch, then quieted when he caught the smell of him. Nora was up on a ladder, handing cedar shingles down to Gus, when she saw the truck pull off the shoulder. "That's Wade," Gus said, not moving from his spot. "I see him," Nora said. Wade got out slow, hands empty, no folder this time, no phone in his fist. He stood by the truck a moment like a man deciding whether the ground would hold him. "I'm not here about the bank," he said. "Bank and I aren't exactly speaking these days." "Heard about that," Nora said, climbing down. "Heard the review board's still meeting on you." "They are," Wade said. "Might cost me my license. Might just cost me the job. Either way, I'm done pretending I didn't know about that easement before I pledged the land." Gus set his hammer down on the porch rail, arms crossed, saying nothing, watching the way he'd watched everything since this started. "Ashworth's lawyer called me 3 times this week," Wade said. 40 families. I signed papers telling them the collateral was clean. It wasn't mine to pledge. Wasn't my daddy's either, turns out. Not since 1959. "You knew that part," Nora said. "You knew about the deed before I did. You just didn't know where it was." Wade nodded, slow, like the admission cost him something physical. "I've got $11,000 saved," he said. "Not much against $60,000 in pilings, but it's something. I want to put it toward what Ashworth's investors are owed. Not because a lawyer's making me. Nobody's made me do this part yet." Nora studied him a long moment. The evening light was going soft and orange behind him, catching the new cedar shingles half laid across the roof. "Why now?" she said. "Why not on the courthouse steps in front of Peggy, if you meant it?" "Because on the courthouse steps I still thought I might keep some of it," Wade said. "Took me a while to stop doing math on what I could still hold on to and start doing math on what I owed." Gus finally spoke. "Your daddy was the same way at first," he said. "Took him near 10 years to admit Hollis had the better hand on that shop lease back in '71. Man came around eventually. Renner's just come around slow." Wade almost smiled at that, though it didn't sit easy on his face yet. "I'm not asking to be forgiven," he said to Nora. "I know what Daddy's note said. I know what he thought of me at the end, leaving me the house and nothing else, hiding the real thing from me under a hound's floor. That's not a small thing to sit with." "No," Nora said. "It's not." She looked past him, out toward the creek, where the water was running low and easy under the last of the light. "You can fill the water bowl," she said, "Sundays, if you want to start somewhere." Wade blinked at that, like he hadn't expected an answer that small. "That's it?" he said. "That's a start," Nora said. "It's not nothing. Man used to come out here as a boy and do exactly that till he stopped." "You said so yourself." "I did," Wade said quietly. "Do it enough Sundays in a row," Nora said. And maybe we talk about the rest. I'm not signing anything today, just telling you where the door is." Wade nodded, once, like a man taking instructions he intended to follow. "I can do that," he said. He didn't stay long after that. He got back in his truck, sat behind the wheel a minute before he started it, like he was making himself remember the way the porch looked, the new shingles, the dog watching him from the steps without growling this time. Then he pulled out slow onto Route 9 and was gone. Gus picked his hammer back up. "That's more grace than I'd have given him," he said. "It's not grace," Nora said. "It's a water bowl. He's got a long way to go before it's grace." By the end of the month, the county had recorded the deed clean, the resurvey was final, and Earl Tice's auction house in Knoxville had moved the first batch of silver dollars for $190,000, with the rarer New Orleans mint coins still to come. Nora sat at her kitchen table with the settlement statement in front of her, Carol Bevins across from her with a legal pad of her own. "You don't have to decide anything today," Carol said, "but you asked me about the Marina families. I did some digging." "And?" Nora said. 40 deposits, averaging $3,000 each, Carol said. "Ashworth's already refunding what he can out of what's left of the development fund. Comes up about $18,000 short across the group. Small potatoes next to what you've got coming in, but it's real money to some of those families." Nora looked at the number a long moment. "Put $20,000 toward it," she said. "Round number. Tell Ashworth it's not charity. It's a renter cleaning up a renter mess. He can call it whatever helps him sleep." Carol wrote it down without arguing. "That's generous," she said. "It's convenient," Nora said. "I'd rather sleep too." She didn't tell Carol, and didn't need to, that some of it was for Hollis. A man who'd spent 60 years quietly correct about a piece of land nobody else believed in, didn't need his grandniece starting her new fortune by watching 40 families lose their savings over it. The shack itself came back to life slower, the way most things worth doing usually do. Gus finished the roof by the second week of the month, new cedar shingles gone silver gray already in the sun, tighter than the old tin had been in 30 years. Nora repainted the porch rail herself on a Saturday, radio propped in the window, Buck asleep in a patch of shade with his tail thumping now and then at nothing in particular. It was Gus who brought the sign. He came out one evening with a plank of oak under his arm, sanded smooth, and set it on the porch steps without much ceremony. "Made this myself," he said. "Figured it needed a name. Wasn't right calling it just the shack anymore, not with what's under it." He'd burned the letters in with a wood-burning tool, careful and even, the way a man works who's spent a life being exact about small things. Renner's Landing. Nora ran her thumb over the letters, feeling the grooves. "Landing," she said. "Not shack. Landing's where a boat comes to rest," Gus said. "Where you tie up after the water's been rough a while." Seemed to fit. They hung it together above the porch door that same evening, Gus holding the level, Nora driving the screws, Buck watching from the steps, like he approved of the whole operation on principle. When it was up straight, Nora stepped back to look at it, porch light already burning behind her, warm and yellow against the coming dark, same as it had every evening for 6 years, whether anybody but a hound was there to see it or not. He'd have hated the fuss, she said. He'd have hated the fuss and loved the sign, Gus said. Man liked being right, just never liked being thanked for it. Nora reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the old postcard, corners soft now from being carried too many places. She read the line again, though she had it memorized by then, in Hollis's own careful hand. "Don't let them tell you what a thing's worth till you've looked underneath it." "I used to think that was about the shack," she said. "Just the shack." "Wasn't it?" Gus said. "It wasn't really a question." "It was about all of it," Nora said. "The land, the bank calling it worthless, Wade calling it worthless. Everybody in this whole county walking past 42 acres of creek frontage for 60 years and never once looking underneath." "Including you?" Gus said, not unkindly. "For a while." "Including me," Nora said. "For a while." She tucked the postcard back into her pocket, where it had ridden for 2 years before any of this started, and looked out at the creek running low and steady past the tree line, same sound it had made every Sunday she'd driven out here believing she was doing something small. Buck got up, stretched, and ambled over to the water bowl by the steps out of habit, even though it was already full. Nora watched him drink, porch light catching the ripples, the new sign creaking faintly on its hooks above the door. "Sunday's coming," Gus said. "You expecting company?" "Wade said he'd come by," Nora said. "Said he'd fill the bowl." "You believe him?" Nora thought about that a moment. The whole shape of it, the courthouse steps and the coffee cans, and the deed with her uncle's own hand on it, the boy who used to fill this same bowl before anybody in the family stopped speaking to anybody else. "I believe he wants to," she said. "That's a start. Same as it was for me, 6 years ago, before I knew what I was really doing out here." Gus nodded, satisfied with that, and gathered his tools for the night. Nora stayed on the porch a while longer after his truck pulled off, alone with the dog in the creek and a hand-burned sign that finally called this place what it had always been worth, long before anybody bothered to look underneath the floor and find out. The hearing for Wade's license happened on a Thursday morning in the small conference room at the back of Sable Creek Trust's regional office, folding chairs set up around a table that still smelled like bank coffee. Nora hadn't planned on going. Carol asked her to. "You don't have to say anything," Carol said. But the state examiner asked if any affected parties wanted to be present. "Ashworth's coming. Might help if you're there too." Nora sat in the back row next to Gus, who wore his good jacket for the occasion, the one he kept for funerals and courthouses. Wade sat at the far end of the table. No tie this time, hands flat on the wood in front of him. The examiner was a woman named Beatty, glasses pushed up into gray hair, a folder open in front of her thick as a phone book. "Mr. Renner," she said, "you signed a valuation of $900 on a property that carried an undisclosed asset appraised, conservatively, north of $2 million. You also pledged land as collateral without confirming clear title. Tell me why you should keep your license." "I'm not going to tell you I should," Wade said. "I signed off on things I didn't check hard enough. I had reasons to not look too close." "That's on me?" "Those reasons," Beatty said. "Being what, exactly?" Wade was quiet a second. "Being that if I looked close, I might have found what my father hid from me my whole life. Easier not to look. That's not an excuse. It's just true." Beatty wrote something down. "The board's recommendation is a 6-month suspension, mandatory retraining, and a permanent flag on your file for any future collateral work." She looked up. "You'll keep your license." "Barely. Sable Creek Trust is submitting its own corrective filing alongside this one. That's the part that actually changes something." Ashworth, sitting near the front, turned in his chair. "What filing?" "New appraisal policy," Beatty said, checking her folder. "Any parcel over 10 acres or any property tied to an owner over 65 requires 2 independent appraisals before a valuation under $5,000 can be recorded. Effective this month." She glanced toward Nora without quite meaning to. "Bank's calling it the Renner Rule internally. Wasn't my idea. Regional office pushed it through fast." Gus leaned toward Nora, voice low. "Well," he said, "that's something your uncle never got and somebody else will." Nora didn't answer right away. She was thinking about every widow and every old man on a fixed income in this county who'd get a fair second look now instead of a $900 dismissal on courthouse steps. She hadn't asked for that. It had happened anyway, the way water finds a new channel once the old one floods enough times. Peggy caught her at the diner 3 days later, sliding into the booth across from her without asking. "You hear about the Dellinger place out on Route 9, she said. "Old Sam Dellinger, 81 years old, bank tried to call his 11 acres worthless last spring, same as they did with Hollis's place. Under the new rule, they had to send a second appraiser out. Turns out there's a working spring on that land worth permitting for bottled water. Sam's getting real money for it now instead of getting run off." Peggy tapped the table. "Wouldn't have happened without your case." "I didn't do that for Sam Dellinger," Nora said. "I know," Peggy said. "Doesn't mean it didn't happen." She got up, patted Nora's shoulder once, and went back behind the counter. And that was the whole conversation. No ceremony to it, just a fact laid down like a napkin and left there. Autumn came on slow that year, the creek dropping another few inches, the cedar shingles on the shack gone a deeper gray. Wade kept coming out on Sundays. Not every single one, he missed 2 in October. Work trouble he didn't explain and Nora didn't ask about, but he came often enough that Buck stopped barking at his truck at all, just lifted his head off the porch boards and went back to sleep. One Sunday in November, Wade showed up with a thermos of coffee and the old logbook under his arm. the same one Hollis had kept for 30 years, water levels and dates in that careful, cramped hand. "Found this in a box at the house," Wade said. "Been meaning to bring it out here. Seemed wrong keeping Daddy's numbers under my roof when the creek thereabout is out here." Nora took the logbook, opened it to the last page Hollis had ever written in. The ink gone pale, the handwriting shakier than the pages before it. She'd read every entry 100 times by then, but she still ran her thumb down the last line like she was checking it was still there. "You want to keep doing the readings," she said. "You can start writing in it yourself. Plenty of pages left." Wade looked at the logbook a long moment, like she'd handed him something heavier than paper. "I don't know the numbers the way you do," he said. "Nobody did, at first," Nora said. "He taught me one Sunday at a time. I can teach you the same way." He nodded slow, and that was as far as it went that day. No big speech, just a man taking a logbook and a coffee and sitting down on the porch steps next to a dog who decided he was tolerable. Ashworth's marina deal never got rebuilt. The pilings his crew had already poured sat out past the tree line for a while, then got pulled and sold for scrap the following spring, and the parcel he'd optioned went back to a couple in Maryville who wanted nothing more ambitious than a fishing camp. He sent Nora a short letter in December, typed, no letterhead, thanking her for the $20,000 and saying he hoped she understood it hadn't been required. She didn't answer it. Some things didn't need answering, just receiving. By the time the first hard frost came, the courthouse records showed the 42 acres clean under Nora Vance's name, the 1959 deed scanned and filed permanent, the silver dollars long since converted into a savings account bigger than anyone in her family had ever had a reason to imagine. She kept driving the tow truck 3 days a week anyway. Some habits weren't about money. She was out at the shack the second Sunday of December, splitting a little kindling for the wood stove Gus had helped her install, when his truck came around the bend a little faster than usual, gravel popping under the tires. "County called," Gus said, climbing out before the engine even cut. "Bridge easements official. Went up on the register this morning." Nora set the hatchet down. "That's it then." "That's it," Gus said. "Whatever this land's worth on paper today, it'll be worth more come spring, once construction crews start scouting frontage." He looked around at the shack, the new roof, the sign creaking a little in the wind. Funny thing to build a bridge toward. 42 acres nobody wanted a year ago. "Somebody wanted it," Nora said. "He just never got to see it pay off." "No," Gus said. "But you did. Same thing, near enough." She didn't argue that. She looked out past the bare tree line at the creek, low and clear under the December light, running the way it had always run, patient about being noticed. That evening, after Gus left, Wade's truck pulled up one more time before dark, later than his usual visits, headlights cutting across the yard. He didn't come up to the porch. He just got out, walked to the water bowl, and filled it from the hose bib by the steps, same as always. And when he was done, he stood there a second, looking at the sign above the door. The paint on the letters gone a little more weathered than the day Gus burned them in. "Renner's Landing," he said, half to himself. "Yep," Nora said from the porch swing. "Good name for it," Wade said, and got back in his truck without waiting on an answer, and drove off down Route 9 with his taillights fading past the low-water bridge. Nora sat a while longer with Buck's head heavy on her boot, the porch light burning steady behind her, the new sign holding its letters against the dark. The creek kept running past 42 acres nobody would ever call worthless again.